As I mentioned in the previous series, demolition is not a clean process. And if you look here, I'm taking out little pieces of the countertop, and it is getting quite dusty here. I'm using a tile saw to cut these small pieces out because, as it turns out, when we try to dry fit the sink into the space, it did not fit all the way in, and I had to take measurements to figure out how much material I had to take away from the countertop in order to get the sink in here. And what I'm using here is a tile saw, and I've cut these grooves in at about 1.5 inch increments, so it would be easier just to cut the individual pieces out as I go along the outside of the perimeter of the opening. You can also see how dusty it is just from all the debris and dust that is on the countertop itself and on me. If you look at me closely here, I've got the head wrap around me. I've got goggles that enclose my eyes, not the glasses. And then I've got the ear muffs on to prevent the noise from damaging my ears, because that saw makes a lot of noise. And then of course we've got the plastic tent sitting there that is preventing the dust from going all over the place, which in fact really didn't help much as we were going through and cutting this countertop. All the dust was still getting everywhere within the room that we were in. Here the boss decided to add a little humor to this job by writing in the dust, "Good job." And it just highlights how much dust and debris gets all over the place while this is being cut. You'll also notice that I've got blue tape around the perimeter of the cut. That actually for me serves two purposes. One, it gives me a straight edge of where I need to cut. If I were to use like a marker or a pencil to line up where the cut is supposed to be, that would all get covered in dust and I wouldn't be able to see where I'm cutting. So what I ended up doing here is still drawing the line in, but then I put the blue painter's tape in there to give me a very nice visual of what I needed to cut out. Here's a little bit of a humorous view of what I look like, all dressed up like a sand person from the Star Wars episodes, with all the dust on my mask, the ear headphones that I have on, the goggles, and covered from head to toe in countertop dust while I'm trying to get this sink fit into place. What you see here is the top view looking down again of the existing piping that is still there, and we're keeping that there until we get the new sink dry fitted into place. Once that is done, I'll be able to take a look at what changes need to be made to the piping and reconfigure it at that point. You'll also notice at the right hand side, I've gone ahead and put an outlet in that will be the power supply for the garbage disposal. My assumption was correct earlier. When I took the plate off of the outlet cover there were 3 wires in there, the neutral, the power, and the ground, and I was able to simply put an outlet into that space, test it to make sure the wiring was correct, and then we tested to make sure that there was power to it with the switch, and everything worked as expected. So now when I get the new garbage disposal, we'll simply hook it up to the power that's listed there. Here you see the vent that is part of the piping system going back into the sewer line, and this piece is actually required by code. And what it is there's a little vent piece that goes on the top here, which is not shown, and on that there's a little flap that when there's a little bit of pressure building back into the pipe, that little flap will lift up, and then it will allow any air or any gases to escape into the area there. Now, we're not talking toxic gases, we're just talking like back pressure gases or back pressure air. It also acts as kind of like an aerator, allowing the debris that's from the sink to flow clearly through the piping. Kind of like when you pour a jug of water out of a plastic container and there's no air hole to allow the water to escape. It goes kind of slow. Well, if you punch a hole into that plastic container and then pour the water out, the water flows much easily. So this kind of acts like that also. This is just a close-up view of the connection that is going to be going into the P-trap that is underneath one of the drains. You always need a P-trap on any drain that you're going to be putting on plumbing. What happens is the water and the debris flows into the P-trap, and water tries to seek its own level, and it creates a barrier and prevents gas from coming back through the pipe into your sink. So that's the reason for a P-trap. And this is just the connection that is going into the P-trap that we've removed. And once we get the sink dry fitted into the space, we'll be able to determine where the actual P-trap is to be located on this pipe. You can also see a little bit of residue from the purple primer that was used when the house was built. That's on that middle section right there. Again, as I've stated in one of the previous updates on, I believe it was a city sewer project, you always want to clean any PVC pipe with a cleaner, and in this case it's called purple primer. You prime it, which essentially cleans it, and then you use your PVC cement to secure it to the next pipe, and that's what you're seeing here. Finally, after hours and days of work, you're seeing the finished opening for the sink to be placed into. And you can also see that I've cleaned up the perimeter of the countertop where all of that adhesive was. And you can see that it looks pretty good. The back part of it there is nice and cut cleanly. And I think I've already gone ahead and dry fitted at this point, and the sink fits quite nicely into that space. And then now it's just a matter of making all the connections, securing the sink to the countertop, and making sure it doesn't move before we actually make the permanent connections with the piping. So with that, that's going to bring us to the end of this series. We're going to move on and continue on with the installation and go from there. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace out.